pale beige envelope sat silently on the kitchen counter for 3 days. No stamp, no return address, just a slanted line of handwriting. To Mrs. Allison Carter. I saw it on Monday morning, but it wasn't until Thursday morning that I found the courage to open it. That day I was preparing for our 15th wedding anniversary celebration with my husband, Ethan, a hospitalist who had stepped straight out of the American dream, charming, accomplished, admired by the hospital board and adored by friends. But over the past year he had slowly become a stranger. Distant, always blaming work, always forgetting the little things he used to remember. I tore open the envelope while still holding my morning coffee. A wave of expensive perfume drifted out and hit me hard. It was sweet, silky, and absolutely not mine. The letter was handwritten on thick ivory paper, every stroke delicate and intentional. Mrs. Allison, you don't know me, but I've known your husband, Ethan Carter, intimately for the past 10 months. I froze. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the imported tile floor, but I didn't bother to bend down. My eyes stayed locked on that first line. No fluff. No hesitation. The woman, the one who wrote the letter, was named Claire, a medical event coordinator who said she met Ethan at a conference in Denver last July. On the very first night he removed his wedding ring and introduced himself as single. I read those 3 pages over 3 times. With each pass my hands trembled harder, but my eyes remained glued to every word. Claire described hotel evenings, hiking trips in Arizona, and even a secret getaway to Napa Valley. The same time Ethan told me he was covering an emergency shift at the hospital. She wrote that Ethan promised to leave me right after our 15-year anniversary. She believed him, but eventually she realized he hadn't just deceived me. He'd been lying to her too. He told me you were cold, obsessed with your publishing career, and that your marriage was just for appearances. But I saw your Instagram. I saw the way you looked at him in your photos, and I knew you didn't deserve this. That line felt like a blade. Not because I believed Claire blindly, but because everything she wrote, every gesture, every quirk, every minor detail, was terrifyingly accurate. Only someone who had shared a bed with Ethan nightly would know those things. Claire wasn't making it up. She knew about the small mole beneath his collarbone. She knew Ethan always wore his watch on his left wrist to avoid a pressure mark on his right. She knew he was allergic to lavender-based cologne, something I discovered after one night he came home with a rash near his neck. I folded the letter. Neatly. Gently. As though any sudden motion might shatter me entirely. I sat down at the kitchen table, in the house I had designed myself. Every detail from the curtains to the cabinets. A house tucked in the suburbs of Atlanta. The one everyone referred to as the picture-perfect couple's home. I once believed that. I once believed Ethan loved me the way he held my hand at my 40th birthday party, where he promised we'd grow old together. And now, I was holding a letter from his mistress? Not a prank call, not a careless message. A confession, deliberate, direct, and undeniable. And what chilled me to my core wasn't that he had cheated, it was the way he had planned to leave me, like a strategic move in a long-prepared game. I sat alone in my home office, afternoon light casting long shadows across the dark hardwood floor. Claire's letter remained untouched beside the half-finished manuscript I hadn't opened in over 3 months. I brushed my fingers across the edge of the paper, as if it were the last thread tying me to reality. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of stepping back, yielding, believing that quiet sacrifice was the foundation of a happy home. When I met Ethan, I was teaching creative writing at a community college in Columbus. My essays had appeared in a few small literary journals, and I was working on the first chapter of my debut novel. Then, Ethan entered my life, with a confident smile and those eyes that made people want to believe. He told me I had a rare soul, that he'd never met anyone who made him feel seen the way I did. I believed him. We married after just 7 months of dating. When he got an offer from a major hospital in Atlanta, I packed everything, left my job, and turned down an MFA scholarship I'd waited nearly 2 years for. "We'll build a future there," he said. "You can write anywhere." I tried, but between the moves, the hospital galas where I had to look perfect and smile on cue, and the late nights where Ethan asked me to help rehearse his presentations or edit his speeches, my writing shrank, then disappeared. Every time I brought up returning to serious writing, Ethan laughed. "That's cute, but have you thought about income? Don't forget, you're the one holding this family together. Writing doesn't pay the bills." At first I pushed back. Then I began to doubt myself. Maybe he was right, maybe I was being naive. Maybe my place was here, holding space so he could shine. I started skipping get-togethers with old friends. When my mother said I looked withdrawn during her visit last year, Ethan casually replied, "Your mom always finds a way to ruin good things." After that, I slowly stopped calling her. Once, I bonded with the wife of a new doctor at the hospital. She said, "Allison, your writing is really powerful. If you ever need a reader, I'd love to help." Ethan found out, and later that night he simply said, "She lives in fantasy, not someone we should be around." Then he made excuses to avoid them. I stopped reaching out. I thought I was preserving peace. But now I see. I had been quietly erased in my own home. I remember this past February when I found a curled, chestnut-colored hair on Ethan's shirt collar. I wasn't suspicious by nature. When I asked, he stared and laughed. "You're being dramatic. Probably someone from the ER. We worked late that night." Then there was the time I saw a message from an unknown number. "Meet me on the 10th floor, tonight." Ethan said it was an inside joke with coworkers. We were betting who could handle the spiciest food at the Thai place. What are you imagining? He walked past me, tying his shoes, chuckling as if I was playing the part of the jealous, unstable wife. I didn't ask again. I didn't want to be the kind of woman who was always suspicious, always interrogating. I had truly believed that if I were good enough, patient enough, Ethan would return to the man he once was. The man who used to stay up all night reading my drafts and leave notes in red ink. This paragraph choked me up. Keep going. But now I knew. That man had either never existed or, if he had, he'd disappeared a long time ago. I looked around the room, filled with Ethan's diplomas, photos of him with colleagues, certificates from medical conferences. There was nothing of mine, not a single photo, not one framed page of my writing. Just a woman who had spent her youth standing beside someone and slowly fading away. I stood up, took the envelope and letter, and locked them in a drawer. I needed time to think, to figure out what I would do next. But in that brief electrifying moment, like a jolt to the spine, I knew one thing for certain. This time, I wouldn't stay silent. I sat in my car for almost 10 minutes before I could step out. The early June sun in Atlanta was blazing, but I felt cold. On the seat beside me was a printed copy of Claire's letter, carefully placed inside a hard document folder. I wasn't there to ask for advice. I was there to make a plan. The person I needed to see was Julia, my closest friend since college. She was a divorce attorney specializing in marital assets and had helped more than a few women through rough separations. But what made me trust her wasn't just her experience. It was the fact that she had witnessed me walk into this marriage with all the hope of a girl who believed in forever. Julia opened the door after I knocked 3 times, our old habit. Same third-floor apartment overlooking Piedmont Lake. Same Julia. Hair tied high, oversized white shirt, an iced coffee in her hand. "You're here," she said. Her eyes didn't ask questions, they simply understood. I didn't respond. I placed the folder on the table and sat in the armchair near the window. After I finished reading the letter aloud, the first time I'd said it all out loud, I realized my hands had gone completely pale from gripping the pages so tightly. Julia said nothing for a long moment. Then she stood quietly, opened a drawer and pulled out a brown leather notebook, setting it in front of me. "Are you ready?" she asked. I looked up. "Ready for what?" "For the truth, for the moment you stop holding up a marriage Ethan has let go of a long time ago." I didn't cry, not a single tear, but something inside me cracked. Light, like a breath breaking through after being held underwater too long. Julia helped me sketch out every necessary step, backing up all financial documents, confirming joint and separate assets, verifying ownership of the house we were living in. "And one more thing," she said, looking straight at me. "Have you thought about the anniversary party? The 15th wedding anniversary, scheduled to take place at the Ivy Manor, a restored villa known for hosting upscale weddings and private events. Ethan had chosen the venue himself. He said we deserve a classy celebration. The guest list was around 120 people, friends, hospital colleagues, partners in the healthcare industry, and a few high-profile donors from the foundation I'd managed on his behalf for the past 2 years. I took a deep breath. "We're not canceling." "Are you sure?" Julia tilted her head. "I'm not ruining the party." I gave a small smile. "I'm just rewriting the script." For the next 3 days, I moved like a different person. By day, I played the dutiful wife. I went dress shopping with Ethan, posed for invitation photos, discussed flower arrangements with the event staff. He had no idea. Still the same confident look. Still the soft-spoken tone he used whenever he told others I was the woman who keeps his world balanced. But at night, I retraced every step. I logged into the old iCloud account Ethan had forgotten we once shared during our first year of marriage. There I found location history, photos from work trips he'd never shown me. One photo of him standing in front of a hotel in Charleston, hand gently placed behind a woman with chestnut hair, exactly as Claire described. The date matched my birthday, the day he'd told me he had an emergency shift. I saved everything, organized each file, printed out every message I could recover from his old backups, even the ones he had deleted. One message from Claire read, "I wish you had chosen honesty that night." I brought all the evidence to Julia on Saturday afternoon. She flipped through the papers, then looked up. "If you want to go public, this is enough." I nodded. "I don't want to make a scene, I just want him to hear those words, in front of everyone who believed the image he built." Julia studied me. "You're going to say it out loud?" "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm going to read the letter. Word for word." That evening, I stood alone in the dressing room, trying on the ivory dress Ethan had picked out for me, simple, modest, perfect for the role of doctor's wife. I looked at myself in the mirror. But this time, I didn't see the quiet, agreeable woman. I saw someone who was ready to stand not for revenge but to end a 15-year performance. And inside there was only one clear thought. It's time he hears the truth. From me. I parked in the lower garage of Fulton Memorial Hospital where Ethan had worked for nearly 8 years. It was Monday morning. The sun had barely risen, but the summer air was already thick and heavy. I walked quickly to the elevator, my chest tight, but my mind colder than it had ever been. I wasn't there to see Ethan. I came to find Melissa, the admin assistant in internal medicine. Always seemingly overwhelmed but never too busy to help someone who asked kindly. Ethan used to call her slow but harmless. I wasn't so sure he was right. When I stepped into the small office, Melissa looked up surprised. "Allison, what a surprise." I smiled faintly. "I'm working on a speech for the anniversary event. Ethan mentioned the Miami conference last October, the one where he presented. I'd like to pull a few details to include in the introduction." Melissa nodded and turned her computer screen toward me. "The October conference? Let me check the department's schedule." While she scrolled through the list, I pretended to glance at the photos pinned behind her. Group pictures from staff events, birthday celebrations, and one shot of Ethan posing with a group of young doctors. Right in the middle was a woman with chestnut hair and a bright smile. I froze. Melissa clicked. "Here it is. He attended a 3-day conference from October 7th to October 9th at the Levington Bay Hotel." I leaned closer. "Do you have a more detailed itinerary? I want to know what he presented and who was listed as part of the research team." She hesitated briefly, then nodded. "I'll print the registration form and the speaker list for you." As she stepped away from her desk, I quietly took out my phone and snapped a photo of the pinned image. The woman standing beside Ethan. It was unmistakably Claire. Not just a passing affair. She had stood beside him, smiling for the camera. Right where Ethan told me he was focused on scientific research. Melissa returned with a stack of papers in hand. "This is everything I could find. I took them, thanked her, and started walking toward the door. Just as I reached it, Melissa called out, "Listen." I turned around. "I don't know exactly what's going on, but if you ever need anything, I think I might be able to help more than you realize." I left the hospital, heart pounding, clutching the papers tightly. Once inside the car, I began flipping through them. Confirmation that Ethan extended his stay for 2 additional nights after the conference. The reason listed: additional research, at partner's request. No name, no report, no verification. I opened our joint bank account app on my phone. Ethan had never changed the login access. At first glance, the recent transactions looked routine, but I decided to check the full 6-month history. One expense stood out. October 12th, Levington Bay Hotel, $1,430. Ethan told me the trip was fully sponsored, then why was there a hotel bill that high? And next came a receipt from an upscale Italian restaurant. A dinner for 2, French wine, Belgian chocolate dessert. That's not how someone eats during a medical conference. As I scrolled further, it only got worse. A cash withdrawal in New Orleans. A round-trip plane ticket purchase to Portland. A payment at a small jewelry store in Savannah. On the exact date of my birthday. The only gift I received from Ethan that day was a flower vase ordered online. I saved every piece of evidence. Took screenshots, exported PDFs, printed and organized them into labeled folders. Everything was placed neatly into a black document case. At that point, I wasn't acting out of anger. It felt more like reconstructing a story I'd lived, but was only now beginning to understand. That afternoon, I called Julia. I need a forensic accountant, someone sharp enough to read what's hidden between the numbers. She didn't ask why, she just said, "I know someone, you can meet him this week." We scheduled the meeting at her office. The accountant, Devin Price, a calm and discreet man in his early 40s, began combing through the documents I'd provided. After 2 hours, Devin pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, flipped to a new page in the report, and said, "I believe your husband has been hiding an undeclared secondary account outside your shared system." I held my breath. What you're seeing might just be the surface. I wasn't shocked, I was ready. That evening, Ethan came home looking tired. I acted as usual. Set the table, poured wine, asked how his day was. He said they were planning a new inpatient facility and that he was being considered to lead the initiative. I smiled, nodded, holding my glass of red wine. But in my mind, I saw him clearly now. He was no longer my husband. He was the lead character in a truth I was about to expose. I met with Howard Ellis on a Wednesday morning at his law office on the 6th floor of a brick building near Piedmont Park. Howard was my former professor at Emory, the one who inspired me to write a standout senior thesis. He was also one of the few people who stayed in touch after I married Ethan, and the first to ever tell me, bluntly, "You're living in a gilded cage." I told Howard everything: Claire's letter, the evidence I'd gathered, the suspicious transactions, and the quiet loneliness that had become my reality for years. He listened silently, nodding now and then, his eyes steady on my face. When I finished, he opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "Ethan came to see me 3 weeks ago," he said. I froze. What did he want? "He asked about changing the beneficiary on your joint life insurance policy, said you had agreed to remove your name from the primary slot." A chill ran down my spine. I never agreed to that. I know. That's why I refused. But if he asked me, he may have asked someone else too. He laid the file flat on the desk. "You need to protect yourself, Allison, financially and legally." "I've started," I replied, "but I want to make sure it's done right. This time, I won't let him control the story." He nodded. "You have every right to reclaim what's yours, and if those grant funds show signs of fraud, the hospital deserves to know." On my way out of the law office, I called Dr. Lenora Wells, chief of internal medicine at the hospital where Ethan worked. We had met several times at charity events, and I still remembered the one time she leaned in and whispered to me, "Ethan's brilliant, but he hides things too well." I arranged to meet Lenora on Saturday morning at a cafe near the Emory Academic District. She arrived wearing an emerald silk scarf, her perfume subtle and elegant, just like her presence. I didn't say much. I simply laid out the evidence I had, focusing on 2 points: Ethan's concealed travel schedules, and a suspicious transfer amount that matched the research grant from the Camden Foundation he'd mentioned in multiple speeches. Lenora stayed silent for a long time, her eyes fixed on the folder. When she finally looked up, her voice was calm but firm. I had my doubts when the financial report attached to his grant application didn't quite line up, but I didn't have a reason to press further. Now I do. I don't want to create a scandal, but I also can't stay silent anymore. "Allison, I'll speak with the Internal Oversight Board, and I'll be at your ceremony. If something needs to be said, it should be said in front of the people who matter." I left the cafe not feeling lighter, but clearer than I had in years. Ethan hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had built an entire facade to preserve his career, his finances, and his image, while I chipped away pieces of myself in silence. That afternoon, I called my parents. They lived in Asheville, about a 4-hour drive from Atlanta. My father picked up, his voice rough. "Calling a bit early to confirm the event, aren't you?" I swallowed hard. "Not to confirm, Dad. I called because things aren't what you thought." I told them, not everything, but enough. Enough for them to understand Ethan wasn't the man they once admired. The other end of the line went quiet. Then my mother asked softly, "What do you need from us, sweetheart?" I gripped the phone. "I need you there. Not for the ceremony, for me. Because I need to see that just once, you're standing on my side." My father responded without hesitation this time. "We'll be there, and I won't let anyone treat my daughter like she's disposable." I couldn't hold back my tears after that call. That night, I typed out a single-line email. "I don't know if you're ready, but I think we both deserve to hear the truth, face to face. The ceremony is this coming Saturday, if you want to come." I sent it to Claire. Not long after, her reply arrived. "I'll be there, and I'm not running from anything anymore." That afternoon, the weather was soft, warm light, and a gentle breeze, the kind of day people call perfect for memories. The garden at Arlington Estate, the venue Ethan had chosen for our vow renewal, was decorated extravagantly. White orchids, soft amber candlelight, and an acoustic quartet playing delicate melodies. I stepped into the bridal suite wearing the dress picked a week earlier, an ivory satin gown, unadorned, modest, exactly Ethan's taste. My hair was pulled into a low, elegant bun by the stylist, my makeup light and calm. Even I was surprised at my composure. Julia stood beside me, holding my hand gently. You sure? I looked into the mirror, nodded. You know I have to do this. Outside, guests had taken their seats. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, and Ethan's familiar voice. Always confident, always commanding the space like the world was his stage. The hospital board was present. I spotted Dr. Lenora Wells through the window, seated beside Mitch Garvey, the director of grants at Camden Foundation. Even Jade Mallory, a major investor in a healthcare project Ethan had bragged about for months, was in attendance. At exactly 4 p.m. music played. I walked alone down the tree-lined aisle toward Ethan, who stood beneath a white floral arch. His eyes lit up when he saw me, his familiar smile stretching across his face. The same one that once convinced me he could love me forever. When I reached him, the officiant, a family friend and pastor, began. We are gathered today to witness the renewal of vows between Ethan and Allison, after 15 years of partnership. Ethan was asked to go first. He pulled a folded note from his jacket. His voice rang out clear and emotional. Allison, you are the light of my life. I know I haven't always been perfect, but my love for you has never wavered. I stayed still, listening. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, the garden filled with soft applause and a few heartfelt ahs. The pastor turned to me. Allison, would you like to share your vows now? I didn't look at Ethan. I turned toward the audience. From my bouquet, I drew out a small stack of papers, not vows, but a printed copy of Claire's letter. My voice came out steady and clear. I had planned to write new vows for today's ceremony, but then I received a letter. A handwritten one, scented with a perfume that's not mine, and I believe this is what needs to be heard instead. Then I began to read. The entire letter, word for word, without skipping a single detail. Mrs. Allison, I've known your husband for almost a year now. The entire garden fell silent. I could hear chairs shifting, someone breathing heavily. At first Ethan stood frozen, then, slowly, reached out and touched my arm. Listen, stop. I tilted my head, not turning back. You can stand there, this part is mine. I kept reading. I got to the part where Claire described their secret getaways, the promises he made to leave me after the anniversary, and the things Ethan had said about me to her, cold, controlling, and obsessed with appearances. Some people in the crowd gasped. I saw Julia gripping my mother's hand tightly in the front row. My father was already standing, his face flushed red. As I finished reading the letter, Ethan spoke up, his voice shaking. This isn't the place for this, you're making a scene. I pulled out another sheet of paper from the envelope beside me. This is the bank statement. It includes the charge for 2 nights at Levington Bay Hotel, and the payment at a jewelry store on my birthday, a gift I never received. I turned to the hospital board. These documents have been submitted to the proper authorities, and I trust you'll do what's necessary. Lenora stood, her eyes locked on Ethan. Ethan, did you lie when applying for funding from the Camden Foundation? Ethan stammered. No, that was a misunderstanding. Then you won't mind an audit? Lenora replied firmly. I looked around. Faces that once admired Ethan now filled with disbelief and disappointment. At the far end of the aisle, I caught Claire's eyes. She stood still, didn't flinch, didn't look away. When our gazes met, she gave me a small nod. I turned back, removed my wedding ring, and placed it on the podium. 15 years, I played the role of the ideal wife in a one-sided performance, but as of today, I'm ending it. Then I stepped off the platform and walked away. I didn't look back. Behind me, no one spoke. No one stopped me. And Ethan? The man who once controlled every conversation now stood motionless, surrounded by whispers that couldn't be taken back. 2 days after the ceremony, Ethan received a letter from the board at Fulton Memorial Hospital, notifying him of his suspension, pending internal investigation. I wasn't there, but Julia told me that when the document was handed to him, he didn't say a word. Just sat in his leather chair, hands on his knees, eyes vacant like someone who no longer saw a way out. The investigation began almost immediately. Every expense, grant application, even the medical papers Ethan had presented at conferences were being reviewed from the ground up. The prestige he had spent decades building was being peeled apart, layer by layer, number by number. I didn't feel joy. But I didn't feel pity either. What Ethan was facing, he brought on himself the moment he chose to trample someone's trust for the sake of his own image. I officially filed for divorce on a Monday morning 1 week after the event. Howard Ellis represented me, and our first legal session was quiet and efficient. Ethan didn't contest. His attorney, a man named Brett Linford from a private firm, arrived on time and spoke little. It seemed they understood the situation and wanted to settle quickly before things spiraled further. I didn't ask for anything unreasonable, only what was legally mine, my share of the house, the joint savings, and fair compensation for the years I sacrificed my career. Devin Price, the financial expert I hired, discovered 2 secondary accounts Ethan had opened, under the name of research funds but had used for personal expenses. Most of the withdrawn money couldn't be traced properly. Howard sent all the records to the hospital, and I knew then, the investigation was no longer in my hands. I moved out of the house in Brookhaven on a rainy afternoon. I didn't take much. Just a few clothes, some old manuscript drafts, the vintage typewriter I used in college, and a photo of me with my mother when I was 16, taken the day I received my first scholarship for writing. My new apartment was on the 7th floor of a building near Grant Park. Not luxurious, not overly spacious, but full of light and peace. The windows faced east. Every morning, sunlight poured in. I started writing again, short pieces about fragmented memories. I wasn't trying to turn them into a book. I just let the pen speak what I had silenced for too long. One evening, while drafting a work email, I received a message from Claire. I know no apology will be enough, but I hope you understand, I chose the truth not because I hated him, but because I didn't want to become a second version of silence. I sat in front of the screen for a long time before replying. I don't hate you. I know he lied to both of us. And thank you for writing that letter, it changed my life. I didn't delete the message. I didn't save it as a keepsake either. I let it sit in my inbox. like a marker, a scar that had been stitched, not to be forgotten, but to remind me I'd survived it. News of Ethan gradually spread beyond the medical circles. A reputable health journal published an article mentioning a once celebrated internist now facing questions of financial misconduct. They didn't name him, but everyone who had been at the ceremony knew. I didn't appear in the media, didn't give interviews. I didn't need the public to know I was right. I only needed to know who I was. 6 months after I left the house, and the marriage I once thought unshakable, my memoir Beside the Vows was published. What I had written during quiet nights, beside lukewarm tea and distant traffic noise, was now on the shelves of thousands of women I'd never met. I didn't expect it to be a phenomenon. I only hoped one reader would feel less alone. But within 3 weeks the book was featured as an editor's pick in a women's literary magazine. Then came emails, messages, hidden stories sent to me, as if they had all been waiting for someone to speak first. One evening I received a package from Chicago. No sender's name, just a return address written in a handwriting I could never forget. Inside was a fountain pen, engraved with the words, "Keep writing, even when your voice trembles." And a folded note. "Dear Allison, and I never had the courage to speak to you face to face, but I've read every page you wrote. I know I was once part of the storm, and I know you don't need my forgiveness. But if you can, I hope this pen helps you write your next chapter, a little more gently. Claire." I left the pen resting on the first page of my new manuscript. I didn't rush to write. I didn't force it to become something profound. It was simply a reminder that the truth which once broke me was also where I found my footing. The small apartment near Grant Park was now the home I chose for myself. On sunlit mornings, I sat at the kitchen table with hot coffee and a draft in progress. No one hurrying me. No one sighing behind my back. No more awkward dinners or silences too thick to name. My parents often visited on weekends. Mom brought cinnamon pastries I used to love as a child. Dad always asked about the apartment, but before leaving he would lean in and whisper, "Don't forget, you'll always have a place to come home to." Sometimes Julia smiled and said I should host a small gathering to help women rewrite their own stories. I didn't say no. But I hadn't said yes either. I needed a bit more time. Not to escape the past, but to fully inhabit the present. One afternoon, as golden light painted the cobblestone streets below, I stood on the balcony, watching the city shift into evening. Headlights streamed steadily like patient trails of light. Down there, people rushed. But up on the 7th floor, I was still, unrushed, and fully aware of where I stood. I was no longer the shadow beside a successful man. No longer a name on the guest list, invited to polish someone else's image. I wasn't reborn from ashes. I didn't need anyone to grant me ownership of my life. Simply stopped surrendering it. Allison's story isn't just about walking away from a dishonest marriage. It's a powerful reminder that women have the right to reclaim their voice even after years of silence. In a world where their sacrifices are often expected without acknowledgement, Allison proves that freedom isn't something you're handed. It begins the moment you dare to step out and carve your own path. It's not revenge. It's resurrection, through truth and the courage to live as who you truly are. What do you think about Allison's journey? Have you ever witnessed or gone through something similar? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, inspiring stories about family, love, and the choices that shape our lives.